Hello, firstly I'll introduce this game and then explain why it is that I'm talking about it. Technocide is a top-down, vertically scrolling 2D shooter with pixel art graphics, released on Steam by Dextrous Games on February 26, 2024. It's not your typical STG shmup in that the emphasis is on tactical choice of weaponry and rogue-like progression through the game, but more on that later. Why, you may well ask, am I talking about this game? Well, two reasons. One, my buddy Dace at Shmuptopia was given a code for the game but didn't have time to play through and review it, and he usually sticks to games on the Switch anyhow. So he asked me if I wanted to give the developer some feedback. Two, after playing the game for a good while and realising it wasn't necessarily my cup of tea, I thought it was still only fair to give it a good go and to try and find things to enjoy. After all, the developers deserved it. Back to the game. The developer describes it as a rogue-lite anti-bullethell shoot 'em up. And that's pretty much what it is. You play as a ship with 8-way movement and access to a forward shot to begin with. This forward shot can be turned into a special weapon by building up a power gauge, by collecting the blue fuel cells that the enemies drop. The power gauge diminishes as you utilise your special weapon. Two additional shot types are added as you progress through the game, a shotgun type and a railgun type, both with their own distinct special weapons. Some enemies require the matching of the colour of the weapons to them to allow a quick dispatch, making the player consider which shot type they are using. There is also a backwards inertia from firing weapons, which takes a little getting used to, and the reload times on the shotgun and railgun can prove fatal if you're not familiar with them. So you essentially have 3 base weapons to choose and 3 special weapons when charged to work with. This isn't too much when it comes to an STG shmup, however there are an additional 4 slots for extra weapons or perks available, and tracking them all at high speeds can become quite intimidating, especially for a player like me who daren't even get started on Radiant Silvergun. Some of the extra weapons I discovered were a shield to stop enemy bullets stunning you, electrical blockades to stop enemies getting past you, homing missiles to take out multiple enemies, and a rather useful black hole to whiz enemies off into the unknown if they do manage to get past. Here I think it's worth looking at the individual level design. Each stage is essentially a series of 6 to 7 waves of different enemy types or combinations of enemy types. Each wave is usually about 20-30 seconds long, depending how quickly you defeat the enemies. The core of the gameplay is destroying enemies before they hit the bottom of the screen. You are tasked with defending your mothership that sits off screen below you. If an enemy makes it through that, you take a hit to your health bar. What's nice about this system is that the player ship can take a hit without being destroyed, and there are no enemy collisions. You can get up as close and personal as you like. That said, if you get hit, it stuns you, and that can be disastrous for your run. Darts and faster enemies can sneak through and you can find yourself in a massive pickle with your mothership taking multiple hits at once. The roguelike element of the gameplay means you're not sure which enemy type or combination of enemy types you're going to get, and adapting your playstyle on the fly can prove tricky when you have such a varied arsenal at your disposal. The wrong choice can quickly lead to chain hits and game over. I think this is one of the aspects of the game I find difficult. The roguelike game model wants you to play over and over and keep coming back and learn from your mistakes. However, these mistakes are not your typical "I can't dodge that pattern" skill-based mistakes we often find in shmup STGs, but more of a decision-based "I should have chosen this weapon" based on my experience, the kind of decision making that you'd find in slower paced games. Many of the levels start off slowly and easily, but build up into sometimes an overwhelming difficulty. The lack of a practice mode means you have to sit through a lot of essentially dead time before the challenge arrives, and sometimes you no longer have the resources remaining to deal with them. I think a simple wave indicator would help you as a player to plan your resources somewhat, making the challenge more manageable and fairer in my eyes. The overall level design is different to most shmup STGs too. Instead of the 5+ stages of linear difficulty that you'd usually find, Technocide is split into worlds or sections, each with 3 playable stages that give either weapons, currency or access to a shop. The stages you don't select are destroyed and rendered inaccessible, which can be quite frustrating if you need currency but you only have access to repairs or the shop. A nice feature of this level design though is that you can exit the game and it saves your progress. So if long playthrough time is an issue, you can always pick up your game later on if you need to. Being a full shmup STG addict, I wanted to clear the game and had tons of runs in normal and hard modes. They often ended the same exact way, a bunch of chain deaths for being overwhelmed towards the end of a level when I'd run out of resources. Expert mode was a ton of fun, but I often couldn't get past stage 1, and even the casual easy mode I often saw my runs cut shorter than I wanted, mainly because of my lack of tactical prep and changing tactics on the fly. Chain hits to my mothership were frequent, and then I didn't have the resources to recover. Access to a screen clearing bomb would have been so useful at points. By playing it extremely safely and avoiding the more difficult level multipliers, often to the detriment of the overall resources, I finally cleared easy mode. It ended in a 3-minute one-pattern battle with the final boss. Unfortunately, this felt just a bit underwhelming. A few extra patterns or phases would have felt more fitting for a final boss. Now maybe I was missing out by playing on easy, but I'm not 100% convinced. I feel like this is one of the things that is holding the game back slightly. Players can easily miss out on so much of the game's content and fun because of how long it takes to either get it or unlock it. I've played about 6 hours of this game and I feel there's plenty I've missed, but how do I access it? By playing for hours more, not knowing if I'll see it or unlock it. Also, some of the game's more advanced tactics, like combining shot types, come at a time where the difficulty is high, so you can't really practice with new combinations of weapons, so I ended up not really utilising these fully. I think the problem with this game is me, as a shmup player. I would like to know how long a stage is, how many enemies are to come. I'd like to practice the parts I find difficult and level up my skills in this game. I don't particularly enjoy adapting my loadout on the fly, and I find it quite stressful being overwhelmed by enemies. What I did enjoy about this game was the pixel art, the game handles well, inertia fire on the weapons aside, has some great enemy types and some fantastic weaponry. The level design and progression in the game is what I find most outside my comfort zone. I would love for there to be a free play or arcade mode or a practice mode where you could try weapons, extra special weapon combinations and practice the different enemy types and stage layouts. If something like this were added, I believe lots more shmup STG players would love to play this game. Well, that's my thoughts on Technocide. Hope you found this informative. I'll definitely not be doing another one at any time soon, as it's taken far too long to complete. Shout out to Dace for getting me outside my comfort zone to do this. Peace!